But first, Steny Hoyer's views on bipartisanship. And he's the House Majority Leader, #2 guy in the House behind Nancy Pelosi. Now, here's a guy that I don't often agree with. I think that he reaches out to Republicans far too much, if you ask me. But he made some very good points at a gathering in Georgetown today that I wanted to share with you. He said, look, bipartisanship doesn't mean that you write exactly half of every bill, the Republicans. And that if you consider it that way, that it's a deeply elitist idea. Now, that's interesting. Now, why did he say that? He said, look, it's, quote, it's a deeply elitist view if understood in that context. We're in the majority, so we have the power and responsibility to foster bipartisanship. But it takes two to tango. What he's saying is, look, we won. And if you say, hey, ignore the will of the people and have the Republicans and the Democrats do everything 50-50 in the bills when the people did not elect them 50-50. The people elected a Democratic president, overwhelming majority in the House, and a really sizable majority in the Senate. It is the will of the people that the Democrats try their ideas. Now, if you say, hey, instead of doing that, we're going to split it down the middle, that isn't really effective bipartisanship, and it's elitist because it's saying the people in power should share the power no matter what the people said. I think it's a really good point, actually. And then he said something else, too, that triggered other thoughts for me. He said, these days the conventional wisdom is that bipartisanship is not dead, but on life support. The debate now isn't what happened, but who killed it. But bipartisanship does not mean going out for drinks after the final gavel comes down. So then that made me think, so what is it? It's not having drinks. It's not doing the bill 50-50. Well, I know what it is. It means actually listening to the other side. And Steny Hoyer mentioned that in his speech as well. And let me give you an analogy here, an example. Let's say that the Young Turks became the national talk show. It's like that old chant, you know, that they have in Turkey that's so absurd. Turkey is the biggest. There's no other country that's even big. Well, let's assume that that's what happened to TYT. TYT is the biggest show, and there's no other show that's even big. And so we have a responsibility we've been given by the American people to present all points of view on the Young Turks, which we try to do here anyway, but we have limited resources, right? But if we were that global TYT show that represented all points of view, what would I do? I would have someone on staff like Andrew Sullivan, who I agree with about half the time, and I disagree with half the time, but he's a very smart guy, and I want to know what he thinks. And then I would have somebody on the staff like maybe Joshua Trevino. He's a guy, a blogger that we've had on. He's conservative. I don't agree with him on, I would say, a great majority of the things that we've discussed, but I think he comes at it from a legitimate point of view. He doesn't come at it from a disingenuous partisan attacks, etc., and I would listen to him. Now, does that mean that I would, let's take the case of Josh, do the show 50% my opinions and then 50% Josh's opinions? No. So real bipartisanship is, hey, look, listen to Josh because he might be saying something that he has a good point on, and he might change your opinion on it. And listen to Andrew, and then listen to progressives. Those aren't the only guys I'd have on. Of course, I'd have other contributors as well on the progressive side, moderate, centrist, etc. And then you come up with the best you've got after you listen to everybody. Now, of course, for the presidency, this is even more important. But it doesn't mean that you take their position 50% of the time or even 25% of the time. It means you really listen to them to see if they have good points. And it's not window dressing, and I wouldn't consider it window dressing, because sometimes we miss stuff, or sometimes there's a good point, and I've changed my mind a lot on the show based on good points that the listeners have made. You go, oh, right, I hadn't thought of that. Maybe bluegrass isn't that bad. Kidding about that example, but that's the way bipartisan should work. But it's not supposed to be something where you say, all right, let's make a deal. And the deal is, I'll give you whatever percentage it is, 30% of the bill, even though I don't agree with you, even though I think it's a stupid idea, even though I think it's a counterproductive idea, I'll give it to you in the name of bipartisanship. No, that isn't the right way to handle it at all. So I think Obama has to get to that point. I don't think he's there yet, but I think he's getting closer because he's now reached out to the Republicans in the House and gotten nothing for it, 0 votes. They all voted against him. He reached out to the senators, and he got the 3 he needed, so that's important. But he only got 3, and the others are fighting tooth and nail against him. They've sided with Rush Limbaugh. Then he reached out to Republicans to put in his cabinet. And now Judd Gregg, the Commerce Secretary designate, has withdrawn because he won't play ball. And you can tell from the press statement that the Obama administration put out revealing their frustration with Gregg, that they're getting to the point where they go, oh, these guys aren't going to play ball. Of course they weren't going to play ball. That doesn't mean you should stop listening to them. Yes, you should still invite them to the White House, no matter how unproductive it seems. Yes, you should still have some people in your cabinet who are Republicans and get their point of view, and have conservative advisors as well, and moderate and centrist advisors, and yes, progressive advisors too, no matter what the press tells you. And then make up your own mind and be strong about it. Say, look, I've gotten the advice of everybody, and here's where Senator Gregg convinced me a little bit, or here's where Ray LaHood made a point where we changed the plan because it was an interesting and good point. Or the House Republicans, or whatever it might be. But this is our final bill, and we're going to get this bill done. Because the people didn't send us here to play patty cakes. We ran on a platform of change. And they told us to bring the change, and now I'm going to bring it.